Hey, good evening. Well, we're kind of settled into our place down the hill. Very luxurious for us, actually. Part of that luxury is that I can go out on my motorcycle and I can just go straight out and onto a cement road. You wouldn't think that that was a big luxury, but after the 2-mile mud strip that we used to have to go to get from the house in the hill, it's a big one for me. There's so many things to talk about, and the first thing that I have to say is that as soon as I mention the word video, the dogs start barking, as you just heard. And so I will keep the murder in my heart for that dog and continue to see what happens. Well, we are in very confusing times, and a couple of days ago I did a video saying that it's really all of this thing about gender, it's really about nuts and bolts, and that I was a nuts and bolts kind of guy, getting down to basics. So I went to Alturas, the DIY place there, and I bought some bolts, and there's the bolt. And of course it comes with a nut. Not that we haven't got enough of those already. But the thing is that if you think about the way that sex is designed, you have a bolt and you have a nut. And if you put them together, that's what you get, and that's almost a basic building block. Now, when I was a kid, we used to have a thing called Meccano set. Now, it's funny that it should be called a Meccano set, because in Visayan, Meccano means how much. Well, a Meccano set consisted of lots of nuts and bolts like this. That was the basic building block, and it had framework, and it had sheets, like sheets of metal, and it had multiple holes all around the piece. So if the piece was this big, it had holes all around, so you could fix it anywhere and you could build anything. But if you didn't have a nut to go on the bolt, you couldn't build anything. And that was my point, is that the way that things were designed. Now, I'm not going to go all heavily religious on you, and yet I am. If you think back to how the Creator visualized all of this, the human body is an incredible thing. And the way that it was designed was that you had a bolt, a man, and you had a woman. And the two were designed to be together. Now lately, last few years, more than a few years, we've had a lot of nonsense. Had a lot of men thinking they don't need women, and women thinking they don't need men. A woman actually said that to me. As we disagreed, she said, well, you know what? I don't need a man to complete me. Well, of course, they don't need a man to complete them as women, but their purpose in life is to be with a man. And guess what? A man has the purpose to be with a woman. Now, just think about the design of this, right? You get a man and you get a woman, and they are perfectly matched physically, right? The aperture in a woman is made for the ding-a-ling on the man, and the two go together. Now, this is a universal image. If I talk to any of the students that we have, and I want to talk about such a thing, that's as graphic as I can get. I can put my finger in the hole. And I don't need to talk about whether it's sex or whether it's this or whether that. It's completely understood. It's designed that way. Now, with guys, yes, there's another aperture that they can go for, which is what they do. And they have pleasure as a result, okay? Though I imagine that the guy that is the aperture in that particular enaction would probably spend the first few times biting the pillow. Now let me tell you that once, when I was in the army in Africa, it's not an old war story, by the way. I was in a band. I never fired a shot, never handled a rifle, never got into any action at all. But I was in Africa, and I was in Nairobi, and the band that I was in was the King's Regiment. Now, there was a swimming pool, not particularly palatial. The camp that we were in was just outside Nairobi. And I remember there's all kinds in a band. Any band of guys, there's all kinds. Any band of women, there's all kinds of women. And I remember one particular time the band sergeant was talking to us, and one of the band came back and said, "Hey, I just got back from the pool, and let's call him Harry and I don't know, Harry and Joe." And he said, Harry and Joe were getting it together in the pool, and the band sergeant never missed a beat. And he said, "Really? And who was driving?" And that about sums it up. So whoever is driving is doing the deed. Now, that's supposed to be a man and a woman. And the reason is that we are a species. We are humanity. We are the human race. Now, it's very simple. I, as an old fart, as I am, will pass sooner probably than most of you. And that's okay. I had a pretty good life. But it would be nice if supposing I believe in reincarnation, then I would have to be willing to procreate. I would have to be willing to produce some of these little guys, okay? And if I didn't, if I was thinking about reincarnation, I wouldn't have anybody to come back to. I wouldn't have anything, any human body to come back to. So it's arranged that way. So let's for the moment go the creationist way and say that when God perceived all of this, he conceived all of this in a wave of the hand, because he only had 6 days. If you remember, he only had 6 days to do all this. Well, when he thought of men and women, how to keep the thing going, because with any cycle of action, you've got to have a beginning and a middle and an end. If you remember, George Burns once said that a good talk has a beginning and an end. And in a good talk, those two things should be as close to each other as possible, which I've already lost it on that anyway, haven't I? But keep on looking at the idea that it's designed that way. It's designed to have a female and a male. In fact, whenever you talk in engineering terms and you talk about a piece that fits inside another piece, they will refer to the male and the female. It's a universal thing. And to build anything, even the human race, you need the unity of a male and a female. So all the squabbling apart, all of the criticisms by the women of men, and all the criticisms of the women, all of that apart, you need both parties for it to be a party. Now the thing is, the problem of the Creator, if I may presume to think about what problems God may have had, the problem is, it's a lot of hard work to do the deed, isn't it? You burn off quite a few calories, I'm told, if you're thinking about losing weight. So, how to get anybody to do the deed if it's such hard work and no return except a huge responsibility when the baby is born? So, what's the simple answer? Well, the simple answer is you make it pleasure. So, here we get to it. Now, what's all this fuss about? Is about emotion, is about feelings, and it's about pleasure. It's not real to me in any way that a man can walk around finding other guys attractive or sexy or appealing when there's so many beautiful women around. So I'm boringly normal on this, but a lot of people aren't. Now, a friend of mine, a subscriber, said, but Terence, it's not a perfect world. You can't just do the nuts and bolts thing. What about the nuts that didn't come out quite right? No play on words intended. But what about the nuts who didn't come out quite right? And a bolt can't quite get inside. Or the nut that doesn't come out quite right. Or the bolt, or whatever. There's going to be imperfections. Now, there's a lot of people out there that would like to do a lot of things. And they're against what we can call the mores of the society. It's against the law. And what we have at the moment in Hollywood is where they like to do things which are really against the sensibilities of the rest of us. So it may be that you're looking at this and saying, sure, I like 'em any age, whether you're a man or a woman. And let's face it, a lot of women, well, a lot, there have been women who are teachers at high school, at college, and they've looked at some buff young man who's only, say, 17, and thought, yes, I would like to very much. And of course, any buff young man of 17 is more than willing, usually, because of the pleasure factor. So it happens, and it happens both ways. Both women and men fall for the younger, the minor. Let's keep it to what is the law. And they fall for that, and they indulge themselves on the basis of, first of all, of pleasure, and then it may increase and develop and unfold into a real love story, and it has. I remember one teacher who was accused of raping a minor, a young man, and I never quite know how somebody rapes a man, because it has to be standing to attention, to take part. So anyway, it's not quite like the brutalization of a woman. So she eventually, I think that she may even have served time for that transgression, but she married that young man when he became a little older. So it does happen. So I'm not judging on this. This is not about judging. It's trying to get down to the nuts and bolts of why we have sex. In order to procreate, in order to perpetuate the human race, you have to make it pleasure. It has to be pleasure. And because it's pleasure, sometimes, often, in fact, mainly nowadays, it's become that we think only of the pleasure, and we can't actually do that. So, what about the concern of my friend who loves to act the devil's advocate? I mentioned in one of the comments, I think you're on a razor edge when you start to act the devil's advocate on things like this, because it's easy to slide off that edge and become the devil's disciple, because you're going to be arguing for the fact that they're okay. Now, it's not my purpose to start talking about whether what they do is okay. But the thing that has to be realized is that nothing stays still. Everything progresses. And what we're seeing now is the progression of nuts getting with nuts and bolts getting with bolts. Now here's the thing. As I said in my little nuts and bolts video, if you leave a little group of nuts together on a desert island, and on another desert island, not too far away, but far away enough, you leave a load of bolts. Here they are. You put the bolts all together. And I'm sure for a while, because they know exactly how to please each other, they might be very, very happy. And then, as age comes on, will they be able to perpetuate the little community that they're so happy in? And the answer is no. And you can talk about the people who say there are men out there who are saying that they have periods. And I think that there's a lot of women out there that are saying, oh no, you can't. The nearest thing that anybody experiences in agony is not even close to what a woman goes through when she gives a child. It's not something that us guys can even think about. We don't know. We don't know how it feels, and we never will. You can empathize. You know, I can look at almost anybody, and I can empathize with the situation that they're in. If they're having, I've been broke, I've been abandoned, I've abandoned people. Everybody has done both sides of this. It's not a one-way thing. Nobody has been just the victim, because research has shown that when someone is badly abused, when they often get into another relationship which promises to be good, based on their experience, they become the abuser. So we have this thing of going back, the pendulum swings, and it goes from good to bad, and it goes over to good only for so long, and then it can come back and it will be bad, and then when it's only bad for a certain amount of time, it swings back to good. And this is one of the things that motivates us to keep going. I think it was our friend Sylvester Stallone put it very well. He said, it's not a matter of how many times you get knocked down. It's a matter of how many times you get knocked down and get back up. So you get knocked down 7 times, you get back up 8. And that's called success. So, a little aside there. We've all had our problems. We've all had our victimhood, shall we say. And we come through it. And now, sometimes we're full of judgments on what is happening to other people. But the thing that concerns me about this confusion of really what is quite a simple situation of design and build, and that is that they are in schools across America. They're actually legislating against this, but the thing of great concern is that children as young as 7 and 6 years old are having whispered in their ear that maybe the fact that a little boy likes playing with dolls, maybe that's because really he's a little girl in a boy's body. So we have the tools, we have the knives, have the scalpels, and we can help him, her, to change it, and vice versa. And of course, there was a well-known singer that changed to being a boy and had her breasts removed and posed for me, a very disturbing picture, topless, where she showed a dark line across her chest where her breasts had been removed. And the problem now is, as you will see if you go on YouTube and type in how you will, that you want to see videos about people who are being interviewed that realized that they'd made a terrible mistake and how to get back. Quite a problem, because if they can't get back, what place is there in the world? So why do we have to stick to nuts and bolts? It's called ethics. It's called spirituality. It's called having faith in the Creator, in God, in Jesus. And it's about realizing that just because you want something, you can't have it. You know, I'm the worst kind of sweet tooth. And I would eat donuts by the dozen. And I can't. Because I wouldn't have got this far if I allowed myself to go on what I want rather than what I need and what benefits the community around me. So the work that I have going at the moment, I'm very fulfilled in. And it's based on a lot of things which I have to say, I can't have that. Now, there can't be a married man or a married woman alive who doesn't look and see someone who is far more beautiful or far more handsome than the one that they're married to. Let me tell you in closing, when Beth and I met, I always say this, everybody would be bored in listening to it, but I looked at her and I said to myself, she's too young. And she looked at me, and you won't be surprised to hear this, she said to herself, he's too old. But then we found a lot of common ground. And just on the basis of knowing each other for 12 hours, we agreed that we would be faithful to each other until I could get back to Cebu from San Fernando. And we kept that agreement. And when I came back, we then were able to have a clean relationship that was not based on having to forgive a load of garbage that had gone on while we were away from each other. But when we agreed to be together, from my experience as an old fart, I said, it is clear that because of my age and how I'm no longer the stud that I may have been at one time, we won't argue that point, but I was younger and more attractive than I am now, but that's not now. So there were going to be times, it was very clear, that Beth especially would be seeing young men much more attractive, much more handsome, and possibly with money, because right back then I would have had to have saved up to be broke. So she was going to be tested, so she had to be sure. And surprisingly, because it's the Philippines, I would be tested too, because I would see, frankly, more beautiful women than Beth. There are stunningly beautiful model type women all the time presenting themselves in passing, walking past, smiling. It's the Philippines and it's full of gorgeous women. So I must be strong in my commitment to her, as she must be strong in her commitment to me. And knowing that that was coming prepared us in a way which was the right way. So I'm sure that that hasn't changed for Beth. I'm sure that she goes out any time during the day, as I do, and sees much more attractive people by the truckload. And she has to be strong on that, as I do. I have to be strong, because for me, as with any man, it's funny, and I'm sure that this happens for women as well. When you're by yourself, nobody wants to know you. But if you're with someone, then now that's different. Now you get lots of interest from lots of the opposite sex. And I'm sure that that's the same for women as it is for men. And then you think, why am I here? I could be almost with almost anyone I want. Not true. It's not true. So as far as my friend Ron says, yes, Terence, it's not a perfect world. And what about all of these nuts and bolts that aren't quite good enough to fit together? They're not properly made or something. What are we going to do? Melt them down and use it? That's not the humane way to do it. And of course, he's right. It's not the humane way to do it. But allowing someone should allow themselves to do something which will be against their faith, that will be another thing. And that's what we have to think about. This is the way that it's designed to go. And the reason for that is because we want to wake up and see lots of little nuts and bolts coupled. And they, in fact, will grow to be this big. And then they will continue to procreate and have more of these little guys. It's the way that it was designed. And it's made a pleasure so that we'll forget the hard work that's involved when we're humping away, and we'll go for the pleasure. But we mustn't take it that the pleasure is all that it's about. It's not just about the pleasure. It's about love. It's about respect. I've made my mistakes and I've learned some very hard lessons, had some terrible losses, And I now know that there is responsibility, there is integrity, there is honesty, there is loyalty, and these cannot be found if you're going the lone way, in my opinion. I hope it helps. Bye for now.